This week's parasha, Parashat Emor, I want to turn to the very end of the parasha. I want to return to the story of the Megadef, the blasphemer, also known as the Mekalel, the cursor. We've actually spoken a lot about him in the past. I have many Divrei Torah. Please PM me. Check out the stuff that I posted this year about the backstory to who was this guy who sadly curses the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's always so much more to Mechadesh, so many more angles to look at the question. So let's look at the basic storyline very quickly, and then let's try to get into a new idea this year. It says the parasha, Vayetze ben Isha Yisraelit. There was a certain guy that went out. He's the son of an Isha Yisraelit, of an Israelite mother, a Jewish mother. V'hu ben Ish Mitzri. But his father was an Egyptian. So he's the son of a Jewish mother, an Israelite woman, and an Egyptian man. Betoch bnei Israel. And he goes, with Vayetze, he walks out, he comes out amongst the Jewish people. Vayinatzu b'machaneh. And then all of a sudden, a fight takes place. A fight breaks out between the Ben Yisraelit v'Isha Yisraeli, between a person who's the son of the Jewish woman and an Ish Yisraeli, which sounds like a full Jewish man. So you have yourself the fight between this guy and another one, and then eventually something goes wrong in this fight. Vayikov ben Isha Yisraelit Hashem. And this person then Vaykalel, and he pronounces Hashem's name in blasphemy, curses Hashem, makes a hole in Hashem's name. We spoke about this in the past. What is he actually doing mystically? But he's messing with the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayaviu oto el Moshe, and they bring him in front of Moshe. They bring him to the court. V'shem imo Shlomit bat Divri lemateh Dan, and his mother's name is Shlomit bat Divri, from the tribe of Dan. And then Moshe puts him in jail to figure out what to do, speaks to God, and eventually the punishment is he has to be killed. Okay, that's the story of the cursor. Now, what was the fight all about? So comes along Rashi, and Rashi says, Vayetze ben Isha Yisraelit, Vayetze, and he went out. What does it mean he went out? So he quotes the Midrash, Mehechan yatsa. Where did he come out from? Rabbi Levi Omer me'olamo yatsa. He left this world, meaning he was losing his olam haba. He was leaving for sure his olam hazeh. He was leaving this world. He was just going to, right now he's about to leave the level of, he was about to go to the level of sin, where he's going to curse Hashem's name, and the ultimate punishment is going to be, that's it, he has to die. Rabbi Brechia Omer, Rabbi Brechia comes along, he says, Mi parasha shlema yatsa. He was coming out, Vayetze, from the previous topic in the Torah. What was the section right before? The section before spoke about the lechem panim, the special bread, the 12 loaves of bread that was in the Mishkan on the Shulchan, that would be changed out every week, and a miracle would happen. It would be warm and steaming at the end of the week. So what happened over here? Ligleg ve'amar, he made fun of it, ve'amar, be'yom Shabbat ya'archeh. The pasuk says, we learned halakha is that on Shabbat is when they would prepare it, they would put it on to the proper place on the Shulchan, and then it would stay there for the week. But he says, Derech HaMelech lechol pat chama b'chol yom. Shema pat zonet shel tisha yamim b'tmiya. He says, I don't understand. A king eats fresh bread. That's what he's all about, is the fresh bread. You're going to make him wait. They're only going to bake it on Friday, take it off. It's going to be a 9-day-old stale bread. So that's that opinion. But like we said, the lechem hapanim was steaming and warm, and he totally missed the miracle. He couldn't see the miracle. Again, see our previous Divrei Torah, we spoke about what that one's all about. Umatnitin amra. And then we have ourselves, one more approach that he quotes over here. He says the Braita tells us that he left the Beit Din of Moshe. And he left, how did he leave? He left it mechuyav, being he was the one that came out guilty in the court case. Why? What was it about? He had come to pitch his tent. He wanted to live in the Machaneh of Dan, in the area of Dan. Because remember, we learned at the very end that his mother was from Dan. Dan. But the guy that was fighting with him, who's probably a Dannite, a part of that tribe area, took him to court and said, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Amar lehem b'nei Dan, and he says, I'm from the Bnei Dan. Amru lo, but they told him, Ish al diglo be'otot leveit avotam. But the pasuk says that it has to go, everyone's going to camp based on their degel, based on their ot, based on their beit avotam ketiv. It says avotam, not imotam. We know that your mother is from Dan, but your father is not Jewish. And I'm sorry, the tribal lands goes by the father, and you're not supposed to be part of the Dan tribe. Go and pitch your tent with the Eruv Rab, go with the converts, go out there. There's actually a machloket rishonim, because his mother gave birth to him before Matan Torah. Does he have a din of a Dannite? Does he have a din of a convert? That itself is machloket rishonim to begin with. But even according to the approach that he's fully Jewish, but he's only fully Jewish from his mother, halacha says tribal land goes by the father. Your father's not Jewish, beit avotam, and that your father is not right. And the pasuk says, Beit Avotam Ketiv. Nichlas leveit dinon shel Moshe. So he went in to fight this out in court. Beyatza mechuyav. And then he came out losing the case. Amad v'gidef. And then what happened, by losing that court case, he got so upset, he curses Hashem. And again, we spoke about the psychology behind this, who his father was, the backstory. We spoke a lot about this from different angles. I want to refocus on this last approach that Rashi brings down, this approach of the court case, from a question that we asked a couple years ago. We said, we don't understand. He's fighting over territory in the tribe of Dan. Now, what do we know about the tribe of Dan? So we've had so much Dan Torah. This is part of our Dan series. We have spoken about Dan at length, hours and hours of Dan Torah. And what do we know about the tribe of Dan? The tribe of Dan, he travels in the back of the bus. He's the last of the three tribes. He's the last of the group of three. He leads the back of the bus. And they were known as Me'asef L'Kol HaMachanot, that they would gather in all the lost stuff of all the nations. And we spoke in the past, many who hold mystically, spiritually, Hasidically, that who was he holding back? Who was he bringing back? Who was he saving? Who was he gathering in that got lost? He was gathering in all those people who got lost along the way. Because we spoke in the past. What do we know about the tribe of Dan? The tribe of Dan is a tribe that had sinned. They had messed up. They'd messed up with Avodah Zarah. Or already early on, already now in the desert, we already find the Midrashim of Dan messing up with the Avodah Zarah. But they're the ones who also understand that despite messing up, despite having a great fall, we can make it back up. We can put our emunah, l'shvutcha kibiti Hashem. Let's put our faith in the salvation in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem will bring us back. And they have the tools because they fell, because they've tasted the asur, they've lived the life of the Avodah Zarah, and they've messed up. They now have the greatest ability to save those people who are falling off the derech, those people who have tasted and are tasting and are involved in stuff that are so anti-Judaism. Dan has the ability to bring them back. They have the tools to bring back all those who fall along the way, and that's the spiritual understanding of Me'asef L'Kol HaMachanot. They bring back the lost souls. But if they bring back the lost souls, so then what's the problem over here? So bring back this guy. This is a lost soul. Yeah, it's true. He's a Ben Ish Mitzri. He's not a full Dannite, but his mother's a Dannite. Either he has the halacha of a full Jewish mother but no tribe, or he has a halacha of a convert because of the special kind of gifts. But whatever it is, okay, it's the lost soul. Dan, it's your job to bring him in. So why aren't you letting him pitch your tent? You are the Ma'asef L'Kol HaMachanot. Okay, so that's the question we asked a couple of years ago. We gave an answer back then. We suggested a few years ago that Dan was in a very dangerous territory. Since the tribe of Dan had a history of sin, a history of Avodah Zarah, of dealing with of idolatry itself, we also want to bring in a little bit with Shlomit Bat Divri over here. There might have also been an issue over here with improper relationships, maybe. But we also mentioned in the past that the tribe of Dan later on in Navi, we find also got itself close to non-Jews. That it created a secular court system. In the times of the Navi, the tribe of Dan couldn't conquer its main territory in the Tel Aviv area, in Gush Dan of today, but rather it went all the way up to the border of Syria, and then it even created what's called Erkaot Shel Syria. They created the Syrian court system. They used to judge cases. Dan is a language of dinim, of ladun. Dan yadin amo. Dan would judge court cases, but similar more to the style of the non-Jews than to the Jews, which actually puts things in perspective a little bit now today in Israel. Sadly, the last couple of years, there's been major debate about judicial reform, legal reform, and the main fight in this country, which almost led to a civil war, sadly, is between Gush Dan. It's the more Tel Aviv, Gush Dan today's Tel Aviv area. It's the Tel Aviv thinking of how a legal court system should go, a little bit more of a liberal court system based on the court system of really the majority of the rest of the country, which feels like the courts have gone too much to the left, too much to the more secular kind of thought process. But whatever it is, we just see these echoes of history that the tribe of Dan coming with a more secular approach, fighting for a more secular approach. So what we suggested a few years ago was that even though Dan sometimes gets a little bit too close to the non-Jews and sometimes messes up, sometimes gets too much into their ideology, too much into their way of life, sinned with the Avodah Zarah, sadly, but there are times when they put their foot down. And in our story of Shlomit Bat Divri, who was with the Mitzri, we said there's different opinions. Was she with the Mitzri Beratzon? Was it Be'ones? Was she a flirt? We have many Chazals that look at her in a pretty negative light. At this point, they felt the need to make a separation. They said, this Ben Ish Mitzri needs to set up his camp with the converts. We have our lines, we have our boundaries. Our community is not going to allow for people to be with non-Jews, even though we have a section for converts, we have a section for the righteous converts, but that's the story of Shlomit Bat Divri and the Egyptian. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And even though we have the Ma'asef L'Kol HaMachanot, we have certain lines, and we suggested a couple of years ago, this was the line they wanted to fight for. That's actually also coming from their perspective of being legal thinkers, because they're Ish Dinim. They said legally right now, we have to have a line over here, and even in our secular court system, we understand the line over here, and that was the line that they were making. Okay, that's what we said a couple of years ago. This year, B'ezrat Hashem, I want to give two other approaches to the question. The first is a little bit more of a spiritual, a little more mystical approach of Rav Moshe Wolfson. He writes in his Sefer Emunat Itecha, he says that what was wrong with this guy that he was being kicked out of the tribe of Dan. If we mentioned already that Dan is Masefta Kol HaMachanot, Rav Moshe Wolfson himself in other places in his book speaks quite a bit of Dan as well as being that Kiruv tribe. He says, what was going on over here? He says, it must be that the guy that was fighting with him, even though from Rashi it sounds Amruz, it sounds like it was the whole tribe, but he says, whatever that guy was fighting with him, probably realized that he was a Rasha. This guy is an evil guy. And we see that the end, sometimes we like to read the stories and say, oh, because we were so harsh with him, because it was so difficult, the court ruled against him, that's why he cursed God. Or maybe the opposite. There was something really wrong with this guy before. And that was clearly seen. This guy is dangerous. He's dangerous for the Jewish people. We can't have him be part of our Jewish people. We can't have him so close to us because he was really a Rasha at his core. And we see he curses Hashem. So it sounds like this Dannite, this Ish Israeli, he says, I have to distance myself from him. We have a halakha. You're not allowed to be next to a shach and ra. We learn in Pirkei Avot. Distance yourself. Harchek mi shach and ra. Bad, evil neighbors. It's one thing to do kiruv, but you shouldn't be living next to these Rasha. This guy is not a person to mekarev. He saw there was something much deeper with him that was dangerous. But then Rav Wolfson asked, but then why are the other neighbors all around complaining? Why? Now, again, from Rashi's text, it sounds like maybe more were complaining, or maybe more originally were complaining. But if Moshe Wolfson learns, it seems to be this one neighbor, what was bothering him so much? So Rav Moshe Wolfson explains with a concept that he focuses on, he brings us down quite a bit in his Sefer, that he says every Jew corresponds to a letter in the Torah. We have our famous Dvar Torah. Yisrael stands for Yesh Shishim Ribo Otiot La Torah. We spoke about this at length a couple of years ago on Parashat Bemidbar. We gave Mazuz's approach to this. But what does it mean? Yesh Shishim Ribo Otiot La Torah. The name Yisrael means that there are 600,000 letters to the Torah, meaning every single Jew has a letter in the Torah. Therefore, the whole Jewish people, when you come together, if every Jew has his letter, every Jew corresponds to a letter, so when you put all the Jewish people together, what do you have? You have a kosher Sefer Torah. When we come together, we make a Sefer Torah. And he says beautifully, this gives us a deeper meaning in what this that we say, the kol banecha limudei Hashem. We say, and all of your children are limudei Hashem. What does it mean, limudei Hashem? So he learns it over here, limudei Hashem. We are all the teachings of Hashem. Meaning, because we make up the Sefer Torah, because the Jewish people, Bnei Israel, are the letters of the Torah, we are the limudei Hashem. We are the actual teachings of Hashem because we make up that Sefer Torah. And he writes at Har Sinai, when the 600,000 Malachei Asharet came down and they crowned each of us with a keter on our head, he says, what was that crown? The crown that was put on our head was our letter from the Torah that corresponded to me individually. My letter of the Torah, each Jew individually, their crown corresponded to their ot in the Torah. And then he says, and then therefore, if each Jew represents a letter, then he says, if we now look at the way the Jews encamped, we'll get the Parashat Bamidbar, Sefer Bamidbar, we're going to speak about how all the Jews were surrounding the Mishkan. So he says that each tribe corresponds to their place in the Torah. So you have yourself, first off, the person has a letter in the Torah. Then his family makes up the sentence, and then his community makes up a parasha. Then the tribe will make up a larger, a full parasha. So basically, the whole Torah together is based on all of the families coming together, but everybody has their place. And that's why it was so important that the 12 tribes, we're going to have 3 tribes on each of the 4 sides, with Mishkan in the middle, Levi and the Kohanim in the middle. Everybody has to be in their right place because they're corresponding to their place in the Torah. And if you put somebody in the wrong place, the Torah is pasul. You're messing with the letters. The letters are going in the wrong place. You can't put letters in the wrong place. And he says that's why this Dannite was not being petty, because you could say, oh, why do you care if this guy, if this other guy wants to pitch his tent over here? In a minute, Hashem's going to have the clouds go up, and once the clouds go up, we're all going to have to move again. So this is not really permanent place. It's a tent in the desert. Does it really matter where his tent is? So he says, yeah, the specific position does matter, because each tribe's specific position, just as it corresponds to the malachim and the shamayim that are surrounding Hashem's holy chariot, everything is very specific because we correspond to the letters of the Torah, to the parshiot of the Torah, and you can't put one letter in the wrong place. And he says, and this is why when Moshe and Aaron are commanded to count the people, they do it themselves. And it says when they count them, they counted them be'otot leveit avotam. He says be'otot. What is be'otot? Read otot as otiot. They're counted by their letters, meaning Moshe and Aaron went around and met every single Jewish family and told him, you want to know what your sentence is? You want to know what your specific letter is? And he told everybody where to find their ot in the Torah. Therefore, they counted them be'otot leveit avotam. Okay. And he says, maybe we could even say that we know the tribes surrounded the Mishkan on all four sides. So he says maybe those four sides correspond to four of the five books of the Torah. The two in the beginning, the two in the end. We saw in other places in Rav Moshe Wolfson that he seems to sound like the tribe of Dan corresponds to Sefer Devarim, or at least parts of the tribe correspond to the very end of the Torah. Maybe Yehuda is in the very beginning, and Achshon Minadav running first into the water starts off the Torah. But he says the two books in the beginning and the two books in the end, they correspond to these four sides of the camp. The 12 tribes that are on all four sides are these four books. While the middle where the Mishkan is, who surrounded the Mishkan? We have Levi and the Kohanim. Well, right now, what are we reading? Sefer Vayikra. Vayikra is the middle book. Sefer Vayikra is known as Leviticus for the Leviim. It's known in Hebrew as Torat Kohanim by Chazal, the book of the Kohen, because these letters of the middle book correspond to the Levi and the Kohen who encamped in the middle of all the tribes. So this Dannite right now, this Ish Israeli who's fighting against the Ben Ish Mitzri, he says, you can't be here, because if you are right here, you're the wrong letter in the wrong spot. You're a letter that you're not supposed to be here. This is not your place. And it's specifically this guy that's complaining, this Dannite, because he knows my letter is right here. You can't add a random letter next to me. You're not a letter that goes over here. And if you add an extra letter to the Torah, the whole Torah is pasul. You're messing it up. We are encamped in a way that corresponds to the upper realms, to the upper heavens, to the Malachim, to the Sefer Torah. I can't add a letter. To add a letter makes it pasul. You can't be here right now. And Rav Wolfson explains, and that this Dannite was trying to explain nicely at first to this guy, and he says, oh, that's the Lechem HaPanim. He's trying to relate the other opinions together now. So why did he make fun of the Lechem HaPanim? What is this whole story of the breads? Because how many Lechem HaPanim do we have? There's 12 Lechem HaPanim corresponding to the 12 tribes. The tribes are very specific. And then he goes into mystical ideas, how the Lechem corresponds to names of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Gematrias, Ayin, Rav Moshe Wolfson. But there's all these mystical ideas of names of Hashem that it's very specific. You can't just mess with this. We know the Torah itself is names of Hashem. You can't just add a letter. You can't just add a loaf of bread. You can't just mess with things. But he says, but the blasphemer couldn't hear it. He didn't see it. He didn't see that the bread, the lechem panim, which symbolizes the panim, the panimiyut, he couldn't see it. He couldn't see it. He couldn't hear it. And then ultimately he curses HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And nevertheless, Rav Wolfson says we have to revert to the idea that he must have been a Rasha, which he brings down from a different sefer, that it must have been this guy was a Rasha, because honestly, even if we say he was a convert, even if we want to go according to the opinion that his mother's relation doesn't matter pre-Matan Torah, and he has no connection to Dan at all, but still a convert, we know from Chazal that the convert corresponds to the tagin on the letters. The crowns on the letters correspond to the tagin. We spoke in the past about Rabbi Akiva, who's the one that's doresh the tagin. Of course, it's Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva comes from his family line, comes from converts, and the converts correspond not to a letter of the Torah, but to a crown, to a tag on the Torah. So in the end of the day, that if a person is a righteous ger, a person is a righteous convert, you could get added to the Torah. You could become that crown. But therefore, we have to revert to the fact that it was clear this guy was not allowed to be a crown. This blasphemer, whether he was a Jew or a convert, whatever you want to look at him, however you want to go with that Machokat Rishonim, he was a Rasha, and we can't allow a Rasha to join the Jewish people. Says Rav Moshe Wolfson, there are special letters that get crowns, and the letters that get crowns are known as the Shatnez Getz. The letters Shatnez Getz, which mystically correspond to Mekatragim. There are certain mystical prosecuting spirits which we have to put these crowns on to try to protect ourselves. But the word Shatnez Getz, the first word of these letters, Shatnez. What is Shatnez? Shatnez is the forbidden mixture of wool and linen, which derech agav, the wool and linen itself, we spoke in the past, being a hint to the initial murder in the Torah of Cain killing Hevel, which Chazal see as a Kabbalistic backstory to Moshe and the Egyptian that he kills, which according to Chazal, according to Rashi, is the father of this blasphemer, that they themselves are somehow mystically Gilgulim of Cain and Hevel, and Cain and Hevel is the story of Shatnez. But this kid over here, born from the forbidden relationship, is a certain level of Shatnez. And Shatnez, if a person wears wool and linen mixed together, his tefillah, his Torah doesn't work the same way. It won't go up the same way. Now, in halacha, there are times you can bring in the Shatnez. The Kohen Gadol is allowed to wear Shatnez in his clothing. Our holy tzitzit, when we had the authentic techelet, you could mix wool and linen. So in certain times of Kedusha, if it's done correctly, Shatnez would work. But if it's done incorrectly, it doesn't work. So we're not saying there's a problem. This guy's mother is Jewish. Maybe you can say he's a convert, whatever you can say. But it has to. But if he does it wrong, then this guy is Shatnez. And it seems to be that this Megadef, this Mekalel, this cursor of God, it symbolizes the Shatnez. Again, not because of his birth, but because of his attitude, because of his cursing of Hashem. Thus, he can't be a crown. He can't merit a spot in the tribe of Dan. And that's the backstory over here of the court case, according to Rav Wolfson. Okay, let's look at one more approach of the Chatam Sofer. The Chatam Sofer, he actually is coming from a different angle, but he really looks at the question of Dan. He really throws out my question because he's going to look at Dan from a very different angle. The Chatam Sofer is wondering, what's the question over here? If he should be with the tribe of Dan or not be with the tribe of Dan, why are they even going to Moshe's court? We would have a clear miracle that should tell us if this guy deserves to be with the Machaneh or does not deserve to be with the camp. What's the miracle? So it says whoever was worthy to be with the official camp of the Jewish people, then he would be allowed to stay within the Aranei Kavod. He would be allowed to stay within the clouds of glory. And whoever was not worthy to be there was spit out. So let's just see, do the clouds take him in? Or do the clouds take him out? If the clouds spit him out, he can't be here. And if the clouds take him in, he's allowed to be here. Let's just, we don't need a court case. We don't need Moshe. Let's deal with God directly. We don't have to wait for Moshe to ask God. Let's just see if there's a miracle or not. But he explains that the problem over here is a very specific Dan problem. Because Dan was the one tribe that had Avodah Zarah with it, which some say was Pesel Mika or an earlier version of Pesel Mika. And they, according to many Chazals, were spit out of the clouds. The clouds threw them out. They were the Nechashalim. They were the weak ones that Amalek attacked in the back. How come Amalek could attack those Nechashalim? Because they weren't protected by the clouds. Why were they not protected by the clouds? Because of their Avodah Zarah. So there was no godly way at this point until Moshe asked directly to determine this particular guy's status, and hence they have to go to Moshe's court. And that's why the Torah is going out of its way to tell us his mother's name, Shlomit, Bat Divri, Lemateh Dan. Why are we telling us Lemateh Dan? Because the question could only come up in the tribe of Dan. It could only be in the tribe of Dan that was spit out of the clouds that we have to go to court and actually have a legal case to figure out, is this guy part of the tribe, not part of the tribe? What's with his mother? What's with his father? How does tribal lands work? It's a fight. We have to go to court only for one reason, because this is a Dan question, because they're out of the clouds. That's the only place where anybody could even make a claim to go to court, because nobody can tell Min HaShamayim. That's Chatam Sofer. Shabbat Shalom. If I could add one little addendum to the first approach that we said of Moshe Wolfson, that this putting this convert right here, or putting this person who's not from the tribe of Dan in the section of the Torah, by the letters of the Torah, where the neshamot of Dan correspond to these letters of the Torah. So I was thinking, if we connect it to the other Moshe Wolfson that we said from the past, that at the very end of the Torah, specifically the last 8 pesukim that speak about the luchot being broken, and they correspond to the broken tribe and to the future generations of the people walking at the very end, the more difficult times. They say that part of the Torah was written by Moshe B'dema. And we gave in one of our Divrei Torah different approaches. What does it mean B'dema? That he wrote it down with tears. He didn't actually write it according to one opinion of the Gemara, that Yoshua wrote it. So if we're saying right now that the tribe of Dan corresponds to these last Pesukim, and their neshama corresponding to those letters, well, this is a part of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu maybe didn't even write, or if he did write it, he wrote it with tears, or he wrote it, as we said, without any spaces. It's just letters upon letters. So I was wondering, maybe that can also explain why Moshe Rabbeinu says, now I can't rule in this case. These are the last 8 psukim that I'm the least, maybe we can say the least connected to, because maybe I didn't even write it. So therefore, how could I posek who from the tribe is over here and who from the tribe is over there, and can this guy join the tribe? These aren't the letters that I fully grasp. And also, if we go according to the opinion that he's a convert, and the convert corresponds to the tagin, it corresponds to the crowns and the letters. So we know Moshe Rabbeinu, he wasn't the one that understood the tagin. Rabbi Akiva is the one that understands the tagin in the future. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't fully get these tagin, so I can't posek where this convert goes. I don't have a shayachut to the tagin. I would even wonder, these eight psukim are written differently by Yoshua, by Moshe. I wonder if originally, maybe if we say Moshe wrote it and then Yoshua wrote over it, that Moshe wrote it with tears and Yoshua went over with ink, could we say maybe there weren't even tagin? I couldn't find a source. I looked to see, maybe there's a source that originally when Moshe wrote it, maybe there wouldn't even be tagin over there. But even if they are tagin, Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who says, I don't understand the tagin, I don't fully get it, and if this guy corresponds to a tag, I can't put it in. But then also, if we say it was written b'dema, which means it was written letter by letter without the spacing, and that corresponds to the actual physical location of the tribe, so that also makes sense. You want to add another tent to the physical location right now, but this section right now, maybe we say when Moshe wrote it, he didn't write it with the spaces, so there's less space. So Kol Sheken, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't posek this. I asked to ask Hashem, because I don't fully get the spacing when it comes to these letters, because I'm just writing these letters, all in this akhdut, continuous kind of way. I can't find the space for each individual dan neshama, exactly how it's supposed to be, and then maybe make a revach for somebody else to join in. That's not for me to decide. That's for Kadosh Baruch Hu to decide, because these last 8 psukim don't correspond to the full Torah that I fully connect to. Shabbat Shalom.